just delete the one that I had. That's a little bit loud. I don't know how you're getting it, but I'm getting my voice pretty loud, and that's not particularly what I want. So what's everybody been up to? There's been a lot of stuff happening in the news. One of the things is, which obviously, you know, connected to the paranormal, is that apparently a psychic has come forward and given the German police the coordinates of where he says Madeleine McCann is buried, and apparently it's only 6 miles away from excuse me, from the resort. So police are investigating the psychic's claim he knows the coordinates of Madeleine McCann's remains. Psychic Michael Schneider, who has solved other murder cases in Europe, got in touch with the German investigators with claims of where Maddie is buried. The clairvoyant has said Madeleine McCann's body is unfortunately dead and buried in Portugal, northeast of Lagos. He said, often you have a reputation as a freak or someone just trying to squeeze money out of someone, and this is quite hurtful. I never take money. The spot, as I said, is just 6 miles away from Madeleine vanished in Pré de Luz on May the 3rd in 2007. Obviously the prime suspect in Madeleine's case is the convicted paedophile Christian B, who was identified last year. But he has been under police investigation for her disappearance apparently for 4 years. German prosecutor Hans Christian Waters told the Sunday People his officers have used clairvoyance in the past to aid other cases. Last month, apparently, Schneider he helped police locate a woman who was found hanging from a tree within 36 hours of her going missing. Schneider was also able to pinpoint exactly where murdered couple Peter Numer, 63, and Laura Pacelli, who was 68, would be found after they vanished from their home in Polzana, Italy, in January. But he's not the only psychic, however, to obviously come forward and say that he knows about Madeleine. In 2007, Portuguese police trawled through 2 dossiers of claims from clairvoyants and psychics purporting to know where missing Madeleine was. Speaking in 2007, the spokesman said the team would check out tips from psychics in case it was the abductor. He said some of the information is about precise locations or coordinates, and that allows us to go to the place and we will check them out. Just a few days ago we got one addressed near Lagos, but it didn't amount to anything. But in 2018, Kate and Jerry's Facebook page posted Jerry and Kate do not believe in psychics or medium, and they have complete confidence in Scotland Yard. Last year, US police psychic Thea Johansson said Maddie was alive and living in Cologne in Germany. She said she's alive. I can see that she's in Germany. She has no clue about her other family. She was very little. She doesn't remember anything about the family. She added she's very much interconnected with music and dance. She has an amazing, beautiful voice. She will find her own family by accident. My prediction is that she will find them by 2022 or 2024 by herself, because she's going to be very famous in singing. There was a lady, I can feel it, around the age of 45 or 47 who almost pushed Madeleine away. I think the reason they couldn't sell Madeleine right away was the publicity. It was too risky. Everybody was talking about her, so they pushed Madeleine away. TV psychic Derek Akura, who we know passed away last year, apologised to McCanns after suggesting Maddie was dead in 2012. Speaking in 2012, he said, I know her parents are convinced Maddie is alive, and I'm really sorry, but the little one has been in the spirit world for some time now. He later apologised and offered his services to Portuguese police. He said, "I am willing to go over to Portugal to help search for Madeleine. I will go to the place where she went missing and see what I can pick up. I would ask the word of spirits in the area that happened, and anything I found I would pass over to the police and help with their investigation. It was in my mind to go over and search for Madeleine when she first disappeared, but there was already 4 mediums over there. I was surplus to requirements, and I'm not going to be getting in another medium's ground." And obviously, as I said earlier, he was quoted as saying Maddie was dead, which he later denied having said so. Princess Diana's psychic, Sally Morgan, said Madeleine's case was too horrific to share her thoughts. She said, "In 2017, I've been approached about Madeleine McCann on a regular basis. I just think that the parents have the most wonderful faith in God. They're an amazing couple and they've been through hell and back. The last thing they would want is someone like me sticking my nose in. It's just not appropriate." She added, "It would be completely different if they approached her, but lots of other people have, and I just won't go there. It's just too horrific." The thing with the McCann case, obviously I have some very good ideas about what happened, but I'd never share them. I just can't. So that's the psychics. You know, I don't, I mean, I don't hold much water for psychics. I know they do get used by the police, and sometimes they can hit on lucky. But I mean, we've got 4 psychics there, and each one of them has a different story. Surely if they could tap into the spirit world, they would know exactly where she was. But instead, it's 4 different versions of the same thing. As I say, you know, I'm not casting dispersions on psychics, etc. But you know, I do think that there's something adrift with a psychic. Derek Akura obviously is well known for being exposed as a fraud during Most Haunted. Now, as far as I'm concerned, you know, the paranormal experience will never use any fraudulent claims or anything. And the reason being, you know, I'm the skeptic. I run the show. So as a skeptic, I'm not going to use fraudulent things to make something look like it's the spirit world, because I don't believe in the spirit world. So therefore, I'm not going to, you know, pretend otherwise. But some of these programs, and we discussed it a little bit last week when we were talking about the Amityville Horror, some of these programs do, you know, use fraudulent things. And as I say, Derek Akura was found guilty of that during the Most Haunted programs, when it was set up, or he was set up, so that he would talk about a ghost that turned out to be an anagram of Derek Akura as a hoax, or something like that. I can't remember the exact phrase, but it was something along them lines. So yeah, so that and you know, for those that regular listeners of the Paranormal Experience, you'll know how I feel about Ed and Lorraine Warren. As I said last week, I think Ed was more about the finances, whereas Lorraine was maybe a little bit more of a believer. But obviously I'll leave that there, and we'll see what comes. I mean, I could be completely wrong, this bloke could be right, and in a few days' time we do find that Madeleine was buried 6 miles away. We'll just have to wait and see. So anyway, to get back, I just thought I would mention that because obviously it's hot off the press, as it was. But yeah, you know, obviously the Paranormal Experience, as I said, we're going live, live streaming next Saturday, not this Saturday, but next Saturday. Obviously I'm not going to give the location away because I don't want hordes of people turning up. One, it would spoil the occasion, and to the place where we're going. People live nearby, and the last thing I want is for lots of people to be there hanging around and disturbing these people. But I'm also looking for locations to actually do the show from. Now, Thomas, who's one of our Kickstart salespeople who recently started with us, he's been contacting places, and he's had a few people get back. So we're looking into that, and maybe, on a Wednesday night doing the show from. It's obviously no good doing the show from an outside location, because you get a lot of disturbance and this, that and the other. But if we could find some haunted location, I'd quite willingly sit there for 2 hours, in the dark. You never know, because as like last week, I'm streaming to Facebook again. So if you want to see me, I don't know why you would want to see me, but if you want to see me, then you can, because I'm over in. I nearly said it. For those who are regular listeners to the Facebook, they'll know, and I just did. For those who are regular listeners to the Paranormal Experience, they'll know that I would often say the Facebook, and I almost said it there. But yeah, I'm live streaming on Facebook, so if you want to watch me, then obviously get across to Facebook, and I'll see you across there. Apparently, you can't hear the Cabinet of Curiosities when I play them on Facebook. So if you're watching the video on Facebook, which is streaming live, that will disappear, and then it'll be reloaded with the Cabinet of Curiosities on. If you've watched last week's, you'll notice that it has been took off and then put back on again with the Cabinet of Curiosities on. But if you're on Facebook and you fancy, like, sort of that's the feed, that's the Facebook just coming across there. Oh man, stop it. That's the Facebook there. Keep turning the volume on, so I'm trying to stop it. But yeah, if you want to go and watch me, I mean, I don't know why you would want to watch me, but if you want to go and watch me, then I'm across on Facebook. Plus, obviously, you can chat to me on Facebook. There's a chat there. There's somebody mentioned Creed Kafer. I've got no idea what that means. So whilst we have a look, it might be a person. I don't know. We'll have a look. It might be. Oh right, I know what it is now. Creed Kafer is the name that they used as the ghost on Most Haunted, and it's Derek Faker. So Creed Kafer, obviously when rearranged, is Derek Faker. Right, I've got now. Thank you very much, Chris, for that. He's obviously given us the answer on Facebook there. So yeah, Creed Kafer was the name used by Derek, or the name used by the production crew of Most Haunted, and Derek picked up on that. But as I say, it's an anagram of Derek Faker. And what they did was they thought it was strange that he always kept getting this sort of information. So they came up with this idea about this Creed Kafer in this place, and give him a backstory and whatever. And Derek literally sort of said exactly what they had been saying. So obviously he was sacked, which is quite amusing, because if you've watched Most Haunted, it is probably the most fake program out there. But because there is a lot of. When I was watching one, and you could actually see the hand pushing the thing that was moving, and it was like, sort of, I turned to the person I was watching it with and went, really? You can see the hand. It's not even like, it's very well in. But anyway, as I say, there'll be no fakery on the paranormal experience. What you see is what happens. So if we go somewhere like this place next Saturday and nothing happens, then nothing happens. We went to the Welcome Tavern. I actually just watched the video of that the other day, of our little investigation. Not the whole thing, because the whole thing's about 5 hours long. But I watched the segment where we went round and Christine did our crystals and I did the EDF, the EMV, whatever. I'm great at presenting a paranormal show, aren't I? Because I can't even think of what the actual equipment's called. But yeah, I watched the video where we went round, and there was that one spot where something happened. Both Dave and Christine were convinced that it was a spirit. Both Aaron and I were convinced it wasn't. It was very interesting, but when I rewatched the video, somebody said to me, I can't remember who it was, and I'm not going to name names, but somebody said to me there was nothing there that could cause a power surge. If you rewatch the video, it's either on Facebook or on YouTube, obviously Amber on radio. If you watch it, where I am, directly above me, is a smoke detector. Now, I'm not saying that was the cause, but I was told by somebody there was nothing that could have caused a power surge. But because there was nothing that had any power to it, but there was directly above me one of those, industrial smoke detectors. So was it that? Because when we went behind the counter, the mobile phone, the till, the PayPal register and all that, they shot the thing up. So was it the smoke of, was it the smoke detector? Was it spirits? I mean, I said at the time, and as I said, Christian and Dave both said that they believed it to be spirit, and I said, well, I believe it to be a power surge, and that's what I believe it to be. Doesn't mean I'm right. Remember what I said last week? It's my opinion. So if my opinion is that it was a smoke detector, that doesn't mean it was definitely a smoke detector. That just means that that's my opinion, that it was a smoke detector. So was it a smoke detector or was it an actual spirit? Because Christine was picking stuff up off the crystals. Now I mentioned that I'm not a big fan of the crystals. I don't like anything where a human can interfere with it. I am not for one moment suggesting Christine was faking it, but I just prefer going back to what we were saying about Most Haunted and Ghost Adventures and this is that, well, I can see myself on Facebook, so I'm presuming that I am. But yeah, it's definitely, I'm just saying, those that are on Facebook and wondering why I'm talking about that, because Diane's on the radio chat room and she says, I'm checking because I only have Kindle. Is Paddy live on Facebook? It says he is, but the screen is just black for me. Well, I've just had a look on Facebook and there is people watching it on Facebook. Not many, so get yourselves, across and watch it. But there is people watching. I don't know, be right back, so I don't know if Christine's off to Facebook to check me out. Hello Christine. That's if it's you that's on there. If it's not you that's on there, then obviously, I'm wasting my time. But anyway, Christine says yes, he is live. Yeah, no I am. I said I was. But anyway, so the Welcome Tavern, there was the incident with the what's the word? Fluctuation in temperature as well, where Dave was. Dave said it went very cold. I sat in the same place and felt nothing at all. Again, I'm not saying Dave wasn't, being truthful. I'm just saying that when I sat in that place, I found no change at all. I wasn't sitting there when Dave felt it, so Dave could have very well felt something. I wasn't there at the time, but when I sat there, there was nothing. However, I think Christine used the thermometer, and there was a change in temperature when she pointed the thermometer across that area. So as I say, it's an opinion. My opinion was it was nothing. Dave said he felt something. Plus, him saying that it went cold was quite strange, because where he was sitting, there was a radiator behind where he was. So if he felt cold, he shouldn't have done, because, as I said, it was October, so it was cold in Sunderland, he's Diane says, I just have music here. What, on Facebook? You should definitely have me on Facebook. There is people watching me on Facebook, so it's definitely been on Facebook and told them. Yeah, exactly. So thank you very much for that, Christine. I am there. Like I say, I'm definitely there, because people have put stuff in the chat. Well, I don't know. I don't know where you're looking. You should be able to see me just as soon as you go onto Facebook. It should say that the Paranormal Experience is live, or does it say the Paranormal Experience is live, or Amber Radio is live now? So it should be there. But anyway, so I'm looking for places, and as I said, Thomas is doing a grand job of finding me some. He's got some irons in the fire, shall we say. So if you have a haunted location indoors, and you quite fancy me broadcasting from that location, then I'm quite willing to bring my equipment and do the Wednesday show from there. We're quite happy to do investigations as well, if you've got a pub or something like that. So there's a few things that we're gonna look at anyway. But because we want the Paranormal Experience to be exactly that. We want it to be an experience. And it's all about you, the experience. We want you, the listeners, to enjoy it as much as we are. I don't know. Can everybody hear me who's listening on the radio? Because Diane seems to be having trouble, so I'm not sure if it's just Diane who's having the trouble, or whether it's everybody's having the trouble. Christine says, no, he is definitely live on Facebook. I am, because like I say, I've looked at myself, and if I click the mute button on Facebook, there you go. That's obviously there's a delay in what I'm saying, but that was obviously me unmuting Facebook. And she said, you can't hear me on the radio, right? I wonder why that is, and let's have a look, see if there's a problem. That sounds about right. So you get music on there, but you're not getting me for some reason, and I don't understand why. Because that should definitely be linked, but apparently you can't hear me on the radio, but you can hear and see me on Facebook. Is that right? Am I right in thinking that? Dan says she sent a message. What, on Facebook? I haven't got it. But yeah, so you can't hear me on the. Well, right, I've got no idea why that is then. Why you can't hear me on the radio? Because you should definitely be able to hear. The radio should be the bit that you can hear the most. I don't know why. That is definitely turned on. That's turned on. Yeah. Well, I've got no idea. I'm going off shortly anyway to do a cabinet of curiosities. So let's hopefully change that so that right, we'll try that. Let's have a look. Sorry about this. I don't know why it's not. Can't understand why it's not connecting to the radio. Let's have a look. I think I know why. We'll try that, shall we? Let's see if that actually works. Right. You should now be able to hear me on the radio. With any luck. So you should now be able to hear me on the radio. I've just had a quick listen, and you can hear me on the radio. You can hear me on Facebook. So hopefully that's all good. Hopefully I've just getting a message up there, and hopefully I've sorted that. She can hear me now. Right, so now you can hear me. I'm going to go off. I'm going to go and have a try and sort this stuff out so that when I come back, you can actually hear what I'm saying. I'm not going to repeat what I've said because it'll be on the video. So if you want to watch the Facebook video, then please do. The Facebook will go off now because obviously I can't play the Cabinet of Curiosities through the Facebook. So I'm going to go off, but I will be back on the Facebook in about, and I've just said it again, in about 10 minutes. So if you want to listen to the Cabinet of Curiosities, you can either go across to the radio if you're on the Facebook, or you can wait until I upload the actual that as well. The actual in fact, will I be able to do it that way? See, this is the trouble. I'm trying to sort things out, and it's not exactly going very well, shall we say? Right, I'm going to see if I can do stuff whilst I'm away with Cabinet of Curiosities to see if, but the camera from Facebook will go off. But as I say, we'll be back in about 10 minutes. You on the radio will be able to hear Cabinet of Curiosities, but you won't obviously be able to see me because I'm not on. But anyway, I shall see you in about 10 minutes. There we go, there's the Cabinet of Curiosities. That must be a strange thing, mustn't it, to go into a building and there be a dead body sitting in a cabinet. You know, rather strange, but, you know, like these things happen. But anyway, that was the Cabinet of Curiosities. I'm back on Facebook, or I should be anyway. As I say, sadly, the people on Facebook will not be able to hear the Cabinet of Curiosities. But that's just simply because of the fact of the way it is. But you will be able to. Diane says it's Lewis's. Oh man, I've done it again. I keep forgetting that every time I put Facebook on, it's not muted. So was that Diane said in the chat? It is Lewis's uni. So was that the university that Lewis attended? Was it with this strange being in the actual? Because it must be really, really strange to have a dead body in sitting in a cabinet. Especially when you go to uni. I mean, I know, like, sort of when I was studying, we saw pictures of, obviously crimes and dead bodies and stuff like that. But to actually, like, sort of have a dead body in the building with you must be really, really bad. But anyway, let's get back to the paranormal. Now, these next stories are incredibly unusual deaths. Some of these are so incredible that it's almost like they're from the Final Destination movies. Which is obviously, the concept of the Final Destination is you've survived death once, but it pursues you and it won't let you go. So some of them are like that, some are just really, really strange. So anyway, we'll start off with the one that happened in 1985. A radiotherapy institute in Brazil left behind a teletherapy unit when moving on to a new location. The abandoned site was a disputed property. This prevented the owner of the institute from removing the unit that had the radioactive material cesium-137. On September the 13th, 1987, two thieves broke into the unguarded facility to get their hands on any scraps that they could find. They took home the assembly of this teletherapy unit containing the material and began dismantling it. However, the next day, one of them fell sick with diarrhea, swelling and dizziness. He, however, still continued to dismantle the unit. So, he must have just thought, it's something I've ate. So he carried on dismantling the unit, and on the third day, punctured a hole in the cesium capsule. A deep blue glow radiated from the opening. On the 18th of September in 1987, the items were sold to a scrapyard owner, Dever Alves Vieira. The blue light from the capsule caught his attention and he put it on display for his family and friends. Dever's brother took some of this dust home, because you just would, wouldn't you? Glowing dust, let's take it home. But that's not the worst part about it. His 6-year-old daughter got hold of it and started to rub it on her body. 4 people died from this ill-fated chain of events. There was 18-year-old Alves de Souza, who worked in the scrapyard for Dever. The 6-year-old daughter, who had rubbed it on her body, she'd also ate a sandwich with it on her hands. So, especially with this COVID going around, we keep getting told to wash our hands. Gabriela Ferreira, who was Dever's wife, and Israel Baptiste dos Santos, who worked for Dever and extracted lead from the radioactive equipment. So basically, if you don't know what it is, don't play with it. Right. Have I think I know what's happened here. Apparently, you can only see the. You should be able to see me now, Christine. Apparently, you can only see the paranormal experience picture. But now you should be able to see me. I should eventually appear. But hopefully you can still hear me even though you couldn't see me. So yeah, so basically, if you come across something, especially if you've broken into something to steal something, and you come across something that you're not sure of, don't mess with it, is the simple answer. So anyway, this next one is quite strange. 57-year-old Yukit Payne was electrocuted and killed in Anthong, 60 miles north of Bangkok. She was walking about on her farm and she slipped on a cowpat, but to steady herself, she grabbed the electric wire, which obviously electrocuted her, resulting in her death. So once this lady was laid to rest, her 52-year-old sister, Yukit, decided to show the neighbours how the tragedy unfolded. However, she also slipped on the same cowpat, or the same area, grabbed the same electric wire, and was electrocuted and killed. So the moral of the story is, don't do what's already been done. So this next one literally is something from Final Destination. Now you all have heard of, or you may not have, but you know most people will have heard of Lisa Left Eye Lopez, who was a singer with TLC, and she died in a road traffic accident on the 25th of April 2002 in Honduras. She was driving a rented Mitsubishi Montero when her SUV rolled over after she swerved to avoid a truck and then immediately turned right to dodge a car. She was thrown out of the window and died instantly. The moments leading up to the accident was recorded by a cameraman riding in the front passenger seat. Now you might think, well, you know, car accident, yeah, whatever. However, 2 weeks before her death, Lopez was involved in another car accident that killed a 10-year-old boy called Baron Lopez. Though no blame was ever put on Lisa, she took care of the funeral, and in the documentary Last Days of Left Eye, she is seen buying a casket for the young boy. Eerie enough, in the documentary, she is heard saying that she felt a spirit was following her before the accident. The spirit was supposed to kill her, but mistakenly killed the boy, as he had a very similar last name. So, just like the Final Destination, didn't get her the first time, so come after her again. So then we have, on the 23rd of September 2017, so not that far away, 60-year-old Elizabeth Isherwood went to the Plaza Talgath Country Hotel. She was staying for the night, and when returning to bed from the ensuite bathroom, she took a wrong turn and ended up in the airing cupboard. For those who are listening from different countries, an airing cupboard is basically a cupboard where you put stuff that you're airing. I couldn't say that any simpler than that, could I really? It's normally where the boiler is, or you know, and you put stuff in there to dry, you know, more naturally than if you put them into a tumble dryer or something like that. But anyway, she ended up in an airing cupboard. When she attempted to open the door, the doorknob broke off in her hand, which left her trapped inside. So in her attempt to escape, she started to dig through the wall. She obviously first of all started with her hands and what have you, and she was having no what you call it, she was having no luck with that. So she then decided to break off a pipe. Obviously, as I said, she's in the airing cupboard. She broke off the cold water pipe because the hot water pipe was probably too hot for her to get hold of. So she broke off the cold water pipe and started to use it as a chisel, breaking through the bricks and plaster. She was, however, drenched with water that was obviously spraying from the broken pipe. And this plummeted her body temperature so low that hypothermia set in. It took the hotel staff a week to find her dead body in the airing cupboard. What were they doing for a week? One, they had a water leak, and two, there was somebody hadn't checked out who'd only checked in for the night. Sometimes you've got to wonder what these hotel staff are up to, you know. The fact of it's took that long for somebody to actually and for storing linen, that's the other thing it's used for. Now this one, you shouldn't laugh when people die, but this one is quite amusing. So anyway, a man was sleeping in his bed in his home in Brazil when his bedroom roof caved in because a cow had wandered onto it and came through his roof. The bovine was grazing behind the house when it stepped on the roof, which immediately collapsed, and it fell 8 feet down onto the gentleman, fracturing his leg. He was injured but still conscious, and he was took to a nearby hospital where he died from internal bleeding. I mean, obviously, you think of a house, and, you know, especially if you're in the UK, and you think of your house, for a cow to be on your house, it would be quite high up, you know. But in Brazil, they build them in, you know, I'm sure you've seen them on Facebook and whatever, where they actually build the houses in pools. So obviously the cow had wandered across this hole, which was his house, and, you know, come through the roof. As I say, you shouldn't laugh, but it is quite amusing. Now this one, a poodle named Catchy fell from the balcony of a Monteiro family home on the 13th floor. It hit 75-year-old Marta Espina on her head, and both the dog and Marta were killed instantly. Soon Edith Sola joined the crowd. You know, when something happens, there's always the rubberneckers who've got to be in there. So soon Edith Sola joined the crowd that had gathered round the scene. She was standing in the middle of the street at the edge of a crowd when a bus knocked her down and killed her. Now you think, what could possibly go wrong? Well, there was a man who witnessed the dog falling, killing the woman, and obviously the dog dying, witnessed Edith getting hit by a bus and suffered a heart attack, and he was rushed away in an ambulance but died on the way to hospital. So 4 deaths, 3 humans and 1 dog, and all because a dog fell out the window. So there you go, man's best friend. Yeah, you're right, Christine. You just couldn't make it up, could you? You know, if you were trying to write a series of events, you just couldn't come up with that. So then this next one, round about 892, Sigurd the Mighty, the Norse Earl of Orkney, challenged Maelbricht, the Buck-Toothed, to a battle. It was decided that each side would fight with 40 men. However, Sigurd the Mighty broke the rules, and he actually arrived in the battlefield with 80. Obviously, Maelbricht was heavily outnumbered and eventually defeated. As a sign of victory, the head of the enemies was severed and tied to the saddle of the winning warriors. Sigurd, being the head of his tribe, obviously got the head of Bricht and tied it to his saddle. Remember that Bricht's name was Bricht the Bucktooth, and it was because he had a buck tooth, and it was almost like an act of revenge. His buck tooth grazed against Sigurd's leg, resulting in a wound that got so inflamed and infected that Sigurd the Mighty was to die from it. So there's male Brit who got the final revenge, so to speak. Now this one's very, very strange. In the year 1924, Thornton Jones, a lawyer from Bangor in England, had his throat cut in his sleep. As he woke up and realised the situation, he asked his wife and son for forgiveness. Then he motioned for paper and a pencil and wrote, "I dreamt that I had done it. I woke up to find it true." And then he died 80 minutes later. During an inquest, the verdict of suicide while temporarily insane was recorded. The man had cut his own throat whilst dreaming about cutting his throat whilst asleep. Strange. Gary Hoy was known to demonstrate the tensile strength of windows in office buildings by smashing himself against window panes in front of onlookers. However, on July the 9th, 1983, he was looking after a group of visiting law students when he decided to prove the strength of the windows. After successfully performing the stunt, nobody knows but Hoy himself why he did it a second time. This time, however, when he threw himself against the 24th floor glass window, he didn't bounce back. Instead, the pane broke away from the frame and he fell to his death in the courtyard below. So the moral of that story is, if at first you succeed, give up. Because obviously he was DNR'd and then he decided to have another go, and obviously that didn't turn out too well for him, did it? Then there's, on the 5th of March 1977, during the South African Grand Prix, racer Renzo Zorzi's car caught on fire. To extinguish the fire, two marshals, William Bell and Frederick Jansen van Vuren, ran across the track towards the lit car. At the same moment, drivers Hans Juckenstuck and Tom Price came over the rise in their cars. Stuck managed to move his car to the right, slightly missing Bill by only a few millimeters. However, Price wasn't as skilled as Stuck and actually hit Frederick James Van Huren, who was 19-year-old, at 180 miles per hour. The impact threw Jansen Van Vuren into the air and killed him instantly. The extinguisher he was carrying flew out of his hand, smashed into Bryce's helmet, which also killed him. The body of Frederick Jansen Van Vuren was so severely mutilated that the race director had to summon all the race marshals together so he could identify which one was missing. Very, very bad. And finally, on the morning of the 20th of October 2000, 57-year-old Surinder Singh Bajwa came out onto his balcony to pick up his morning newspaper, and a gang of rhesus monkeys attacked him. In an attempt to defend himself, he grabbed a stick and plunged towards the intruders. The monkeys, however, managed to dodge him, and he was carried forward by the momentum, hitting the railing and falling 13 feet down. He suffered severe head and spine injuries, where he was then admitted to intensive care at the local hospital. However, his condition only worsened and he died the next day. Strange but true. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody's seen the Horrible Histories show, but they do like a stupid deaths bit, and obviously they talk about stupid deaths and things that happened. But yeah, I mean that's 11 stories which could, like I say, come from the what you call it, the books of the Final Destination. So we've got a few other stories to go through. So one of them is, are ghosts like tape recordings, or are they, ghosts? The reason I say that is sometime around about 1900, Sir Oliver Lodge, a renowned British physicist, came up with a theory of why two different people in the same, the Darwin Awards online, without shut came up with a theory of why two different people in the same room experienced the spiritual world differently. He said that the spirit was like a broadcast, and therefore not everyone could pick up the signal. He never really expanded on this. However, this theory was eventually expanded upon, but not until 57 years later, and I think about 17 years after Lodge had died. After leaving his job, where he was the honorary keeper of the Anglo-Saxon Antiquities at Cambridge University Museum of Archaeology and Ornithology, T.C. Lethbridge, a British archaeologist, believed that his new home was haunted. This triggered an interest in the paranormal, and he decided to devote much of his time to investigating such phenomena in what he deemed to be a scientific manner. Lethbridge, just like Lodge, believed in the theory that a ghost or spirit was a recording stored by a building. This was made more significant when one day he was sitting on a hillside looking down at a woman's house. This woman was a self-proclaimed witch. It just shows the difference, doesn't it? We're talking like around about 1957 here, 1960. And this woman is now proclaiming to be a witch. And yet, a few hundred years earlier, everybody was denying being a witch because of the fact that if you got, burnt at the stake or hung or drowned or whatever, whereas this woman is actually saying, yes, I am a witch. Strange times. As he sat there, he noticed the old woman going about her daily chores, but what he also noticed was she was being watched by a woman dressed in grey. But neither women seemed to interact with each other. Finding the incident odd, he spoke to the old woman, who replied, "Oh, you've seen my ghost." Lethbridge's first idea was that the woman had been some kind of projection, just like a television signal. Ghosts are supposed to appear on their anniversaries, so Lethbridge and his wife went and sat in the exact same spot exactly 1 year later. However, the ghost failed to appear. But Lethbridge and his wife both felt like a kind of electricity tingling in the atmosphere. There was a tiny underground stream running down the lane where they both, when they stood near it, felt tingling. It was most strongly when they stood on top of the drain cover. The stream runs past the witch's house, and he realised that the ghost had also been standing directly over it. This is why he thought it explained why he had seen the ghost and the witch had not, because he was standing on the line as well. So therefore he could see the projection because he was connected to it. He had been connected to the spot by an underground stream, as if by electric wire, and now it struck him that ghosts were probably tape recordings, or for some reason the picture was recorded in black and white instead of colour, which is why she was grey, or why she was dressed in grey. This reminded him of a time when he was a student at Cambridge, and he had been about to leave one of his friend's house one night, when a man wearing a top hat had stepped into the room. Assuming that he was just a college porter with a message for his friend. He said goodnight, but the man just didn't reply. The next day, Lethbridge asked his friend what the porter had wanted, and his friend looked rather strange at him and insisted there was nobody fitting that description anywhere near my room last night. It was then that he recalled the porter had been dressed in some kind of hunting kit, but it was not red and black like it normally is, but grey. His friend's room in Cambridge, where he had experienced hunter, looked out onto a river and was damp. This gave Lethbridge the belief that all tape-recorded ghosts are seen in somewhere that's damp. At first, this theory may sound far-fetched, but if you had told a contemporary of Shakespeare that one day sounds will be captured on tape or the wax bumps on a record, he would have thought you'd gone insane. If we can accept the sound and video pictures of strong emotions captured on water, so-called electrical ghosts, such as the spectre of Catherine Howard in the Long Gallery of Hampton Court, which is next to the river, there can be no doubt that this theory fits many famous hauntings, and as water has no colour, then the recordings are in black and white, and fade, just like a television set when being switched off and removed from that current. However, not all ghosts or spirits can be classed as a recording. This theory to counter Lethbridge was noted in a haunting which is still said to be happening to this day, or at least up until the closure in 2020 of RAF Linton Ooze. This is an RAF base, or was an RAF base, which was opened in 1937 as a bomber airfield. During World War II, it was used by the RAF to launch the bombers that would drop the propaganda leaflets in Germany before being used extensively as part of Bomber Command to launch attacks throughout the war. At the end of the war, however, it was closed, but then it was reopened again in 1957 to act as a pilot training depot, the task it would be used for until the training centre eventually closed for the last time in 2019. The spirit of an officer has been seen in the main control tower. The spirit doesn't do anything, apart from walk from one end of the room to the other, and then vanishes into thin air. This would, in Lethbridge theory, be a typical ghost. You know, it's been recorded, it's doing the same thing over and over again. But because of who the ghost has been identified as, this can't be the case. Warrant Officer Walter Hodgson had flown many missions from Linton, but on one occasion during World War II, he was shot down and spent the rest of the war in a POW camp. He is one of the characters that's portrayed in the film The Great Escape, but is not named. He was part of the escape, but was lucky enough to be one of them to return back to the prisoner of war camp and not shot. His life, however, was to come to an end only 14 years after being released and returned home after the war. At just 38 years old, he became very ill and passed away in 1959. Hodgson's family dedicated a plaque to him at Linton, and his ashes were scattered across runway 22. This is the runway that he would use when he took off for his missions. The plaque was placed on the outside of the control tower and remained there for some time. The plaque, however, was eventually moved, for no apparent reason, inside the building. This is when the hauntings began. The theory was therefore put forward that while some spirits may be a recording, after all, this had the hallmarks of that, the repeated actions, the spirit appearing in black and white. This haunting, however, could not be, as Hodgson had never set foot in the tower, and it wasn't until the plaque was removed that he was seen. If it had been a recording, then surely he'd have remained outside. So are ghosts a recording? or are they, you know, something else? I know I have heard that theory many times. Dawn on Facebook says, I have seen a ghost for a split second, as clear as looking at you now, but I think the pub is now flats. Shame, because there were rumoured to be two ghosts in the pub. Now, a lot of people have seen what they think is a ghost, and, you know, as I said, you know, it's my opinion. I'm not going to sit here and say you haven't seen a ghost. But have you seen a ghost? It's the question. You know, that's the thing. Is it a ghost? Is it a recording of an incident? Because they say, especially something like a murder, because it's a violent event, it's sort of, you know, the event records itself. The only question I have is, not all murders have a ghost associated with it. So if it is because of murder, you know, why don't all ghosts have that? I don't know. But that's one of the theories, is that you know, if it's violent enough, then it would obviously you know, record itself in that spot, wouldn't it? You know, so is it a recording? Is it, you know, is it something else? It's one of those things that I suppose we'll just have to wait and see if something comes up, won't we? Now, the next story I have, I'll tell most of the story, but then we'll take a break, because obviously we've still got a cabinet of curiosity to play. We're here till 11 o'clock, and then obviously, you know. So, ghosts and apparitions, are they the same thing? Well, few people use the term ghosts and apparitions as if they mean the same thing. However, they don't. A ghost will remain in the spot where it last occupied the earth. So therefore, you know, if somebody was to pass away in bed, for talking's sake, going back to the recording, that's where they would remain if they were a ghost. However, an apparition is the one that is seen elsewhere and interacts with people. An example of this was a rock star. Now, he didn't give his name, you know, and that's obviously a blame. Not that I was taught him, but when the story was wrote, he didn't give his name. But anyway, he was getting on a bus, you know, an ordinary, like, sort of, you know, service bus, and he was walking to the back of the bus, and his 14-year-old cousin was stood in the aisle. Well, his 14-year-old cousin had died some year earlier. He'd been killed in a you know, horrible farm accident. But there he was, stood there. The young kid didn't see anything to him. He was just stood in the bus looking at him. And it wasn't until some headlights shone through the window of the bus that he realised that his cousin was like a protection. Hence, you know, we're still talking about the tape recordings and stuff like that. And for some reason he decided that he just wasn't going to get on the bus. There must be some reason why his 14-year-old cousin is there. So he got off the bus, and he he went and hired a car and drove to drove to the gig that he was playing. He found out 3 hours later that the bus had been in an accident which had killed the driver and another passenger. There's another story of a famous hangman who was visited the night before and he was due to execute somebody. He was visited by the man who was about to execute. And the man, as most people do, were protesting their innocence. And and he was saying how innocent he was, and he hadn't done it, and this, that, and the other. So anyway, he obviously woke up his wife, and she obviously was like, "Well, who are you talking to?" sort of thing. And he was like, just go back to sleep, and there you go. So anyway, the next morning he gets up, goes and does his hangman duties. And everything went according to plan. The trapdoor opened, the man fell, snapped his neck, job done. But there was something broke in the hangman. He just didn't know what was wrong, and he started to slowly go into himself over the next month and whatever. He wouldn't accept any visitors. He wouldn't talk to any doctors about it. His wife kept trying to get him help, but he just wouldn't. But he began talking to himself on a night time, and again, when his wife asked questions, he just wouldn't answer. So then one night she woke and he wasn't there, he wasn't in his bed. So she grabbed a lamp and she went looking for him, and she found him in the basement. He had wrapped a rope around one of the rafters and hung himself. Obviously she screamed, went running for a neighbour, but by the time the neighbour got there, he was dead. There was a note that had been left which read, "I did not hang myself. Howard Frank hung me." Howard Frank was the name of the prisoner who he'd hung that night. So it had played on his mind so much that he'd took his own life, all because of a dream. Was it a dream? Was it an apparition? Even though this man wasn't dead, had his soul, come to him as an apparition, to tell him that whether that he was innocent, and therefore he shouldn't have, obviously gone down that route. Dawn says on Facebook, "I'm not entirely a believer, but I was in a locked pub on my own." Perfect night, isn't it? I've been locked in a pub and saw a man very clearly. I couldn't explain it away. Having said that, I lived in the pub for a further 18 months and never saw anything again. Yeah, but how many pints had you had? No, how many spirits had you had? Oh, yes, yeah. But yeah, I mean, there is, I mean, I am, as I've said, a non-believer, but there is a lot of stuff out there, and that's why I'm so interested in it, because there is a lot of stuff out there that's unexplained. Why do we see shadow people? Why do we see ghosts? What is the purpose? Is it, as Lodge and Lethbridge said, a recording left behind? Is it, because I've heard that theory many times, because we're electricity, or we have electricity running through us, that we leave an image just like an electric image. Is it, as Lethbridge said, recorded on water? And because the water's clear, that's why ghosts have no form. They appear like water because it's recorded on the water. And obviously, as you know yourself, you can pass through water. So is that the reason why you can pass through a ghost? Is that the reason why you can see through a ghost? Because you can see through water. So if it's recorded on water, is that the reason why? And because water has no colour, because when you look at water, I mean, people say the sea is blue. The sea is not blue. The sea is clear. The sea is blue because it's reflecting the colour of the sky. So if the sky was yellow, the sea would be yellow. It's not worth thinking about, is it? Swimming in a yellow sea, but never mind. We'll not go too far down that route. But yeah, I mean, water has no colour. So is that the reason why ghosts have no colour? It is a very interesting subject, and that's why I'm so intrigued by it. Even as a non-believer, that's why I'm so intrigued, because there's so much out there. I mean, it could be, we hear all these conspiracy theories on Facebook, and people, saying all these different things and whatever. Is ghosts the same? I mean, the spiritual, and I'm not disrespecting spiritualists at all, but the spiritualist movement was built on a fraud. It may have become more reputable later on, but it was built on the fraud of the two sisters, who had pretended that they'd been visited. So it is an interesting subject, and often I've heard people say, there's so much that's happened that you can't just, brush it off. It must be true because there's so much that happened. Well, you could say that about flat Earth. There's so much said about flat Earth. Does that make it real? And if it is, why does it matter? If the Earth's flat or the Earth's round. Why did the person who decided to say the Earth is round decide to say the Earth was round if it was flat? What was he going to achieve by it? Now, some people might say, well, the sale of globes. But he could have sold discs, couldn't he? So it is a very strange thing. Very, very interesting. And, I want to look into it more. The problem I have with looking into the paranormal is you have the two sides of the coin, the non-believers and the believers. Now the believers will tell you everything's paranormal. Like I said right at the beginning of the show, which those on the radio couldn't hear, but those on Facebook did. When we went to the Welcome Tavern, we had a spike on the EMF, the EDPG, whatever it's called, ECG or whatever. We had a spike in one particular spot, and then it was gone. It was there and it was gone. Now the two believers, i.e. Dave and Christine, both said that it was a spirit. The two non-believers, i.e. me and Aaron, said that it could have been a power surge. Now Dave and Christine were convinced it was a spirit. I was convinced it was a power surge. I was told that it couldn't possibly be a power surge because there was nothing there. However, recently watching the video, which, as I said, if you're on Facebook, you'll have heard me say this earlier on. Recently watching the video on YouTube, on our channel on YouTube, directly above, and I'm not for one moment saying this is what caused a power surge. I'm just saying it, putting it out there as it was. Directly above where I had because it was me that was holding it, so it wasn't even like I could say, there was no happening, somebody moved the needle. It was me that, but if you watch the video and you look directly above where I go, oh, I've got something there. Directly above me is an electronic smoke alarm. Now, as I say, I am not saying that that was the case. All I'm saying is I was told at the time there was nothing that could have caused a power surge, but because there was nothing electric around it, but there was, directly above it, was a smoke alarm. As I say, I am not for one moment saying that the smoke alarm caused it. I'm just saying that could be a possibility. But it is quite interesting. And then I mentioned the fluctuation in the temperature. Again, I went and sat there after Dave had been sitting there and felt nothing. But Dave said he felt the fluctuation. Again, I'm not saying Dave is being untruthful. He did, you know, he said he felt it. I wasn't there when Dave felt it, so I can't turn around and go, no Dave, you didn't, because I wasn't there. I did sit there afterwards, and I felt nothing. But the biggest question is, he said there was a drop in temperature. Now the strange thing about that, and I've mentioned this in the past, behind where Dave was sitting was a radiator. So why was there a drop in temperature and not the temperature rising? Because the radiator was there. Now, even if a radiator goes off, it takes time for the temperature to drop. It's not like a sudden drop. It's the opposite when you switch a radiator on. Although a radiator takes time to heat up, heat would there would be a fluctuation in the temperature more or less straight away. As soon as the radiator started to heat up, it would then get warmer and warmer. But the opposite, when you switch a radiator off and something starts to cool down, it doesn't cool down instantly. It would take time for it to cool down. There'd be, you know, would you feel the difference? I don't think you actually would. If a radiator was cooling, I don't think you would notice the difference, because, you know, your body and what have you would be staying within the temperature of whatever the room was. I don't know. As I say, I'm not an engineer. You know, so for it to be a drop in temperature, it's quite a strange one. I know Christine had her. Dan says if he got warmer, he could feel the air around cooler than him. Yeah, but the question would be, how did he get warmer? Without the air around him getting warmer, but he would have to have, you know, had some sort of heat boost. You know, I don't know. As I say, I'm not an engineer. I'm somebody who can get a fingerprint off a telephone. You know, that's my level of science. You know, I can tell you where somebody's walked. You know, and I can tell you the size of the footwear and what have you by the print. That's my level of. I'm not a physics engineer or anything, so I couldn't really answer that. But yeah, that's the sort of thing that happened. So, you know, interesting stuff. And then, as I say, that you've got the tape recordings of the apparitions and what have you. Why did Howard Frank come and visit this hangman? Because Howard Frank was not dead at the time. He was very much alive. So how was he visiting when he wasn't dead? You know, it is a strange one. But anyway, it's approaching 10:30, so we're going to have another cabinet of curiosities. Christine says, I've been ghosting for around 6 years now, and it took 4 years before I saw my first black mass, shadow person, whatever you want to call it, and I have seen nothing since. So Christine's had an experience with a shadow person. And I've heard of these shadow person, and to an extent, depending on what you call a shadow person, I've experienced it myself where I've saw something out of the corner of my eye, but then when I've looked, there's been nothing there. Now, is it that there was something there that caught my attention, and when I've looked, it's not there, or was it never there in the first place? And was it just literally a figment of imagination, or, you know, the light, or whatever? But I have heard about these shadow people. It is quite a, as I say, it's a very, very interesting subject, and one that I do intend to look at more. I also want to get out and do stuff. I mean, now, obviously restrictions with the COVID, etc., are starting to lift a bit. We can, we will be able to do that. I think the Saturday that we're talking about is the Saturday just before the final lift off is, you know, we're talking about the 19th of June is when we're going to get out there. But I also want to present the show from somewhere haunted. So if you've got a pub or, you know, a house that's haunted, I'm quite willing to bring my equipment, sit in your house for a couple of hours and, you know, read some ghost stories, etc. I mean, I'm currently going through all my ghost stories to like, you know, to obviously make the show very interesting, and I've got loads. You know, I mean, I could go for years with the amount of stories I've got. So hopefully we can talk about some of them. Chrissy says it charged straight at her, the shadow person. So it wasn't like I was saying where it's at the corner of your eye. It actually darted straight at her. Right. Now I've never heard of that sort of shadow person. That is very, very strange. Have you been on the spirits there, Christine? Oh, obviously, yeah. I've never heard of that one. There's probably a few people out there who've experienced that, and they're going to turn around and go, "Well, of course, that's what happens." But I've never heard of them running at you. But yeah. So anyway, I'm going to go off and I'm going to play the last of the Cabinet Controversy. The Cabinet of Aaron Mankey and the Cabinet of Curiosities. The last one for tonight, and then I'm going to come back with a story about apparitions to end the night, and I shall see you shortly anyway. So, same as before, Facebook will go off, sadly, but when I eventually download the videos and get them reloaded, it'll all be there for you to watch. It'll also go on to our YouTube page. The YouTube page hadn't really been looked at, but then I uploaded last week's Paranormal Experience to it, and it's had something like 1,000 or 1,200 views or something. So, you know, people out there are very interested in the paranormal, like me. It's just, you've got so many charlatans out there that causes the problem. But anyway, enough of me waffling. Here's Aaron Mankey and some Cabinet of Curiosity.
Dante Alighieri spent nearly 2 decades writing his most famous work, what we now call the Divine Comedy. I say now because for the first 2 centuries after his death, it was simply called Commedia, and the Divina was added around 1555. It's seen as the most significant work of Italian literature, and is still studied by scholars woven into popular culture today. If you've heard the phrase, the circles of, you have Dante to thank for that. Most recently, the author Dan Brown, known for his novel The Da Vinci Code, published a novel called Inferno. As you might imagine, Dante features heavily in the story, and it's amazing to see a work of literature still so influential after over 500 years in print. But it almost didn't happen. As I said before, Dante spent nearly 2 decades writing his masterpiece. Everyone around him had plenty of time to learn about his project. His 2 sons, Jacopo and Pietro, were most likely allowed to read along as he wrote it. I guess my point is that people were aware of the book. It was the center of its existence for so long, after all. And then in 1321, just a year after he had completed the whole thing, but before he had a chance to publish it, Dante died. His family went through that same sort of grieving process we would experience today, wrapping up his final affairs and making sure his burial was taken care of properly. But within weeks, life would have moved on. Except his sons couldn't forget that manuscript, and who could blame them? Now, the Divine Comedy is a collection of 100 parts called cantos. Going through his papers after his death, Dante's sons discovered that there were 13 cantos missing. That's 13% of the book, 1/8 of the completed work. And not just any 13% either. They were missing the final chapters of the entire story. It was maddening. According to an early Dante biographer, the sons searched the family home for months, through every scrap of paper they could find, dug through drawers and boxes, and looked for a clue that might tell them where the missing pages had gone. But nothing worked, and they left empty-handed. Friends recommended that the 2 men simply complete the story themselves. They knew how it was supposed to end, and they were familiar with their father's work, so why couldn't they just piece together the final parts and call it a day? And that was certainly possible, but it was far from ideal. They, like a lot of other people, wanted their father's official ending. As the story goes, one of the sons, Jacopo, went to sleep one night after another frustrating day of searching for the papers, and a short while later, began to dream. In it, he saw the figure of his father, dressed in white and glowing in that Renaissance painting sort of way. Still fixated on the missing papers, Jacob asked his father about it, and the older man nodded before walking over to a particular spot along his chamber wall. And then he pointed. Next morning, Jacopo called for a lawyer to watch as he searched the room. Right in the spot his father's ghost had told him about, he found a hidden compartment with stacks of paper inside. They were covered in mold and had begun to rot on the edges, but they were still legible. After reading through them for a moment, he smiled. The missing pages had been found. It's crazy to imagine, but one of the most significant works of literature of all time almost didn't happen. The Divine Comedy is responsible for providing us with vivid images of the world beyond our own, from hopeful visions of paradise to the nightmarish trials of hell. The fact that they even exist today at all feels like a random victory for Dante. His sons, though, it was nothing short of a dream come true. The 1860s was not a good era for transatlantic travel. The most advanced passenger ships were steam-powered. Even with that technology, the average journey from England to America took nearly 2 weeks. That's a long time to be in the middle of the ocean, considering how often weather can change over a 2-week period. In October of 1863, 2 ships departed Liverpool on their way to America. One of them, the Africa, encountered horrible weather and reportedly sank as a result. The second ship, the City of Limerick, wasn't doing much better either. They had been moving through rough seas or storms for nearly a week, and there didn't seem to be an end in sight. On board was a man named Mr. Wilmot, who was returning to the United States where his wife awaited him at home in Connecticut. Wilmot was sharing a stateroom with a man named Mr. Tate. The 2 men slept on bunks in the room, Wilmot on the bottom and Tate up above, but for at least a few days, Wilmot had barely moved from his bed due to seasickness from the choppy waves. One stormy night, Wilmot was sleeping in his bunk when he had the most vivid dream. In it, he could see the door to the tiny stateroom slowly open, and there, dressed in a nightgown, was his wife. It was a logical vision. He missed her terribly, and the growing anticipation of being reunited with her hadn't helped. If it was just a dream, it was good to see her again. When she stepped into the room, Wilmot noticed a nervous look on her face. She cast a worried glance in his direction, but higher up, as if she were looking at the bunk where Tate slept. Then, carefully, she crept over to Wilmot's bed, stooped down low, kissed him. A moment later, she stood back up, slipped out of the room, and the dream was over. The next morning, Wilmot awoke to find Tate standing beside his bed, staring down at him with a frown. "You're a fellow," Tate said sarcastically, "to have a lady come and visit you here." Wilmot was confused and asked his friend to explain himself. Tate went on to describe in incredible detail the visit of a woman in a white dressing gown who had a bunk and kissed Wilmot. Naturally, Wilmot was stunned. It was exactly as he had dreamt it, but that wasn't possible. How could two men have the same dream, let alone doing so inside the same room? This would be an amazing tale if it ended right there. But there's actually more. About a week after the shared dream, the steamship docked in New York, and Wilmot caught a train north to Connecticut. His entire family had gathered to welcome him home, and it was probably a very happy occasion. But the moment he and his wife had a second alone, she surprised him with an unusual question. "Did you receive a visit from me a week ago?" he asked. Stunned, Wilmot nodded, but also noted that it was impossible. How could she have boarded his ship and found him in his quarters? Her answer was chilling. Apparently, after hearing the news of the sinking of the Africa, she had spent days suffering from deep anxiety, worried for the safety of her husband. One night, about a week before his return, she found herself still awake for the night and was so overcome with fear that she imagined visiting her husband as he. She described entering the room and how she could see Tate awake in his own bed, watching her as she looked around. She described the kiss, the gentle caress, and then her silent exit. Then, as if to prove it had really happened, she described every detail of the room, right down to the structure of the bunks the two men slept on. If the story of Mr. and Mrs. Mott is any indication, love is a powerful, mysterious force that binds us to each other. Sometimes we love someone so deeply that we can't shake the feeling that they're right there with us, even when they're far away. And perhaps there's a good reason why.
So, was that a case of a apparition? Did his wife, because she was fearful for him, appear as an apparition? Because his friend, or the person who he was sharing his room with, also experienced or saw the his wife as well. So was it was that a case of an apparition? Anyway, we're gonna finish tonight on a story which is about apparition. So most people had difficult time knowing what to make of 41-year-old Neil Holton, a gifted physicist who had survived an ordeal with cancer. Neil should have been a family man and a real part of his community. Instead, he spent his spare hours acting as the sexton of the cemetery, making certain that vandals hadn't done any damage to the headstones, helping tend the grounds, and sometimes even doing handiwork for hours on end. Neil also loved to hike. He told his few friends that nothing made him happier than taking his skis and going off into the mountains to fish and hunt during the bitter winters. He obviously appreciated the white beauty of the mountains. And when Neil didn't have time to travel, he put on his snowshoes and tramped around the countryside near the cemetery where he worked. He was doing this on the day he saw the person he would later describe as the Dark Man. The sun was shining, There were western winds that kept the snow blown in golden clouds, half blinding Neil as he tromped across the hills on his cross-country skis. He was just coming down the slope leading to the cemetery when he saw a man dressed in black. It looked like he was dressed as a minister, but not a minister from today, but a minister from 2 centuries ago. "Hello," Neil called above the wind, but the minister didn't seem to hear. He just kept walking up the hill. Neil moved quicker in order to try and catch up with him so he could talk to him. But however, the man always seemed to stay that distance away from the same distance. The elusive black figure wove in and out of the whirling snow, and then, just as quickly as it appeared, he was gone. He just vanished. There was no other way to say it. The dark man had been there, and then the dark man was gone. Just gone. Didn't go into the field, didn't go into a house or any building, simply vanished into thin air. Over the course of the next few weeks, Neil lost interest in everything except for the dark figure. He finally confided what he'd seen to his friend Paul. Excuse me. He even convinced Paul to go up the hills with him, so that they could look for the dark man. Neil and Paul spent most of their free time searching for the dark man, but the search was useless. They never saw anything. Paul obviously began to wonder if Neil was just hallucinating, if the dark man wasn't just a creation of Neil's mind. He had just had cancer and was losing all energy. And maybe in that weakened state, well, Neil had just started to imagine things. But after one late Friday afternoon jolting through the hills, all of Paul's doubts were taken away. They were just heading back to the cemetery, frustrated as usual by not seeing anything, when Neil said, "Look!" At first, Paul's mind refused to believe what his eyes saw. 20 yards away from the perimeter of the cemetery stood a young man in a deerskin clothing, should I say, a raccoon hat of the 17th century deerstalker type. The skins were grimy and well used. He looked shocked by them as they were by him, and he kept staring at the clothing that Neil and Paul was wearing. "Where you going?" Neil asked. And when the young man spoke, it was in a tongue that bore no resemblance to anything from today. He said he planned to meet his friends, and he was cutting across the field to get there. Neil recognised immediately that something was very wrong here. First of all, the friends the young man had mentioned seemed familiar to Neil, but he wasn't quite sure why. Second of all, the path the young man proposed to take was impossible, because it would take him straight through the new reservoir. However, a man that was born a century ago wouldn't have known that the reservoir was there. The young man started to walk away. Neil and Paul called for him to wait, but just like with the dark figure, the young man vanished before they could stop him and ask him any more questions. Neil had always been interested in the history of the region. He had considerable library books devoted to the legends and the lore of the area. He also had a book that listed the names of early settlers. Among those names, Neil found the people the young deerstalker wearer had spoken about, and mentioned as his friends. No wonder the names had seemed familiar. They were names he'd come across in his history books many times, which meant that the young man that they'd come across was at least 200 years old. Paul accepted the truth. He became interested in the paranormal matters, and he would spend his life deeply intrigued by the occult and the supernatural. Neil, however, didn't respond that well. His encounter with the spirit of the deerstalker disturbed him. He had trouble sleeping. He began losing considerable weight, and along with the weight loss, he lost energy. Friends of his mentioned that he began to delve into the nature of ghosts and learned that a TV producer called Alan Landsberg said in his book In Search Of that a ghost is a split-off personality that remains behind in the environment of the person's previous existence, whether a home or a place of work, but closely tied to the spot where the person actually died. Ghosts do not travel, do not follow people around, and they rarely leave the immediate vicinity of their tragedy. So it's what we were saying before, wasn't it, about the apparition and the ghost. The ghost remains in the spot that it last habited on Earth, whereas an apparition would follow somebody around. Margaret Waite, in her book, The Mystic Science, noted famed occult writer Hans Holzer believes that all ghosts are psychotic, disorientated entities that have been unable to rise above some massive tragedy in their physical life. Also propounds an interesting theory that man's emotional tensions might constitute an electromagnetic field similar to radiation field in the atmosphere. After all, he asked, if an atomic explosion can make part of the atmosphere radioactive for many years, why not a miniature outburst, such as a sudden death? So again, exactly what we were talking about before. If we're made of electricity and something happens to us suddenly, and does that burst of electricity record itself, on the area, and is that why ghosts can be seen? Like this kind of atmosphere might explain Neil's deep slip into deep depression, should I say. He saw something symbolic and something of himself in this mysterious deer stalker who plied the same area year after year, era after era. Neil began to weaken noticeably. Now he spent many hours sleeping and he could have communications with several of his friends. He could sometimes be seen staring at the hill where he'd first glimpsed the mysterious deerstalker wearer. His doctor was concerned that the cancer had returned, but test after test showed that Neil had no physical troubles. Some believe that during this time Neil was visited by a discarnate, a spirit whose earthly personality has survived death completely. Unlike a ghost, which rarely communicates, or a spirit which often communicates, but is usually signal-minded, focused on warnings for the earthbound, unlike these, a discarnate is a full-bodied spirit, so to speak, capable of expressing most of the human emotions: pleasure, pain, sadness, even jealousy. Now, sometimes you hear about these, don't you? You hear about a ghost wailing and stuff like that, and suffering, pain. And I have got a few stories which I'll obviously come across in the weeks to come. One which is very interesting, which is about a ghost that feels, so to speak. In the 1930s, popular fiction was filled with tales of lonely young men who fell in love with beautiful discarnates. Thorne Smith, creative topper, wrote several novels about them. The discarnate who may have visited Neil was probably brought in through the portal of Neil's own interest in the occult. Because that's the other thing, isn't it? They say if you mess with the occult, such as the Ouija board and stuff like that, you can sometimes bring... I didn't know, and that's why I love this show, because I learned so much. But one of the things that Dave and I discussed many shows ago was the Ouija board, and how you have to close a Ouija board. Now, I wouldn't know that. So, if I was to ever go on the Ouija board, which I've got no intention of ever doing, but if I was to ever go on a Ouija board, I would do the Ouija board, I would, do my bit. Is anybody there? And that sort of stuff. But then when I got sick, I would just, like a board game, I would just pack it up and put it away. I didn't know that you had to close it. And that's basically what they're saying here, that this Neil had obviously, brought the discarnate in by his belief in the occult and what he was doing. Like I say, I don't know. Some say the discarnate who contacted him was generous of heart and spent her time with Neil reassured him that there was a much better world beyond his life. Whatever was on his mind, Neil decided to find out about the better world for himself. A few weeks later, he took his own life. On the day that Neil was buried, one of the mourners was distracted by a sight that he saw. Stood on the hill overlooking the burial was a young man in what appeared to be a deerstalker hat. Dun dun dun. So that's the discarnate, which is another form of apparition. I know I've got a story, I mean obviously not tonight because we've only got a couple minutes left, but I've got a story about a banshee, because that's another thing that is strange. This is what I'm saying about how exciting the world of the paranormal is, and if it was true, the stuff that goes on, because you've got like sort of the discarnate. So anyway, Dawn says on Facebook, the Blacksmith Arms at Hartlepool is supposed to be haunted. It's next to a graveyard. Supposedly there is a tunnel from the pub to the church next to it. Well, yeah, there's a lot of the old pubs, because that's where murder victims and hanged victims, etc., were took to, weren't they? They were took to the pubs after either they'd been, murdered, or they were they'd been hung in the public executions, and they were took to the pubs, and obviously to stop people from raiding the bodies, they had the tunnels. Because I know the Schooner Arms up at Alnmouth, where Dave used to live, there's a tunnel. It's actually in one of the stories from his mum, which I'll have to hunt out and play some of them. But yeah, there's a tunnel that leads to the old mortuary from the. So I suppose it would be the same, wouldn't it, for the prison. For the pub, the one that Dawn's on about, the Blacksmith Arms at Hartlepool. I suppose that would be the same principle. It is. There is a lot of interest there. There's nothing that's definitely proved to me that ghosts do exist, but I must admit, since the beginning of the paranormal, I've become more and more intrigued. I still don't believe, don't get me wrong, I've seen nothing yet for me to go, yeah, ghosts exist. But I am more and more getting intrigued with the stories, etc. I'm trying to find stories which are difficult to debunk. The problem is, all the stories can be debunked, because you can always find an answer to what it could possibly be, and that's the problem with the paranormal, is until I actually see something definitive, then it'll always be, well, it could have been. I mean, it could have been with Neil there, it could have been the cancer playing on his mind, why him and Paul saw this deerstalker. Could it be a story that they came up with together? Could Paul have been appeasing his mate because of the fact that he was suffering from cancer? There's so many, and I've said this last week, and I'll probably say it many times in the show to come, there's so many parameters that can explain different things, but there is always, and always will be, the possibility that it's paranormal. That will never ever go away. There's always the possibility. So anybody who's listening, who's a believer, and thinks that I'm always trying to find a reason for it not being paranormal, that's not the case. I'm just giving an alternative for what it could be. The paranormal is always there. That will always be one of the options. that it could be paranormal. I'm just saying, but it could be this. It's like the like I was saying about the EMF or the ECG, or I'm sure Christine's gonna punch me in a minute and staple it to me head what it's actually called. But both Dave and Christine were convinced it was a spirit. I think it was a power surge, but that doesn't mean either of us were right. It could be it was a power surge, which means Christine and Dave were wrong, or it was a spirit, in which case I'm wrong. But they're the two main possibilities. There's other things. There was the fact of I had my mobile phone in my pocket. Did somebody text me at that particular? Because there was only that one incident that had happened. No other time did it happen. So, did we hit a power surge? Did I receive a text? Whatever. These are all things, and because it was our first ever paranormal experience investigation, we obviously are learning as we go. So the next one will be a bit more smoother, and so on and so forth, and hopefully we can sort something out. But I hope you've enjoyed the show tonight. As I've said, please let me know if there's a place where you would like us to go to and investigate, or even for me to broadcast from, because I do want to do that. I do think it'd be more interesting to present the paranormal experience from somewhere that's reputed to be haunted, because I think it would give it that little bit of a, chill factor, as it was. We've had some experience. I mean, last week we had Ben playing. This week the video just wouldn't work. So there is things happening during the paranormal experience. Things that can be explained. The Ben thing I find a bit difficult. I don't know how I can explain that. But I've listened to the soundtrack back and I can't hear it. So was it an interference at Sonia's house, or did anybody else hear it? And if they did, was it an interference with the internet? Was it a spirit playing Ben? I don't know. But anyway, I'm off now. So for those who like the Paddy McGuff Show, I'll be back on Sunday with the Paddy McGuff Show. In the meantime, there's obviously a lot of great shows coming up. Sadly, we're losing. Diane's asking what is the Ben thing. Last week, during the show, Sonia said that she could hear Ben, as in Michael Jackson's Ben, playing during the show. Now I was saying I don't have that song at all. I don't have it. I don't possess that song, so I don't know how. So I don't know if it was interference on the internet, it was an interference, near her house or what. But the song Ben was playing. But yeah, I mean, I'll like I said, I'm back on Sunday with the Paddy McGuff Show, and I'll be back next week with more of the paranormal. Now, what I was going to say was, on Thursday nights, we did have Dancing in the Kitchen with Pete. Sadly, he's leaving us tomorrow. That's the reason why the paranormal was on a Wednesday. So the question now I'm asking is a Wednesday, Christine said she could hear it as well. Is a Wednesday the best night for paranormal, or would you rather go back to a Thursday? I'll stick a poll on the Facebook page, and then we'll see what we get. We'll see what the replies are. See if it's better on a Wednesday or a Thursday. But as I say, we moved it to a Wednesday because of Dancing in the Kitchen with Pete. But we're going to move it back to a Thursday if Thursday is better for you. But the thing about a Thursday is we could do a longer show as well, because we could do from 8 till 11 on a Thursday. So It depends on whether you want an extra hour of the paranormal or whether you're happy with just the 2 hours. But anyway, I'm cutting, as with my show, I do it all the time, I'm cutting into somebody else's time. So I'll, as I say, I'll put it on Facebook and we'll take a poll and see what happens. But in the meantime, I'll see you all on Sunday. So, you know, don't have nightmares, as they say. You know, most ghosts can't harm you. It's the poltergeist you've got to watch for. Good night from me, and good night from him.
Thanks for listening. Check us out on Facebook.
Listen carefully, if you will. There are rules. You feel you now have control, don't you? You think you will walk away untested. I promise that my work will continue. That I have ensured. Some will assume that this is over, but I am still among you. You want a chance? I'll give you a chance. Most people are so ungrateful to be alive.